Now, sometimes when I'm making videos, I go down various rabbit holes, and that's exactly what happened when I made the Argos video a few weeks ago. Links may be here or down there if you missed it. I mean, where were you? Why did you miss it? Anyway, from that whole video, one system in particular really caught my attention. So much so that I ended up actually going onto eBay and purchasing one. And even though it's really old and some might say a little shit, it's actually becoming one of my favourite all-time systems. So I had to do a video on 5 reasons why everybody, and I mean everybody, yep, including you, should own a Philips G7000, or if you're from North America, a Magnavox Odyssey 2. Let's go and check it out. The Magnavox Odyssey was the first commercially available home video game console way back in 1972. Yes, it was crude, relying on TV overlays to spice up what were effectively just Pong-style games, but more importantly, it used game cartridges. Well, okay, not really. They were really just cards that essentially altered the input and shape of the paddles or moving objects, but it was an important step in the evolution of video gaming. By 1978, Magnavox, at this point owned and operated under the Philips name, had released their follow-up second-gen console to rival the Atari, Intellivision and, in North America, the Fairchild offerings. The Odyssey 2, as it was named in North America, or in Europe the Philips G7000, was pretty different to its contemporaries, in quite a few important ways. Most strikingly, it had a keyboard. It marketed itself very much as a computer rather than a video game system, but this was perhaps a little bit of a stretch. But with some educational titles and even a basic module add-on called the 7420, it had way more potential in that department than its rivals. The other rather important difference to the other second gens, which honestly could be a video all by itself, is the console's relationship with the now processor giants Intel. 4-bit processors were very much the staple for Intel during the early 70s, but these couldn't handle the pixel manipulation needed for the next generation of home video game systems. So they developed the 8244, the first programmable sprite-based game chip. Intel looked at who to offer this chip to, and Magnavox, primarily Philips, seemed a good fit as a strong name within the industry. Fast forward 6 months and 2 problems existed. One, the games design team at Magnavox had hit a block with coming up with new games. 2, the Intel chip had a bug in its system, which took a year to sort out. Meanwhile, the Atari 2600 was already out and doing good numbers. So the heads at Philips agreed to cut their losses with the 5,000 or so units they still had in stock and close the whole thing down. Now this is the bonkers part, strap yourself in. A chap called Ed Everett, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, an engineer at Intel, got wind that they were shutting it down and called them to try and persuade them to keep manufacturing. His argument was that they just needed more software, which they'd come up with a roadblock with. Their own team had run out of ideas, so Ed said he'd create some games as long as they didn't can the project. They compromised on seeing how a couple of games would sell before killing the system completely, so he got the gig. Intel were happy for Ed to work on the games, as more consoles that were sold meant more silicon for them. So Ed struck a royalty deal with Philips, which meant he would get a cut of sales as opposed to a salary, so the risks were low for Philips to give him a chance. And so it went. For 2 years. Ed would push out a game, it would sell really well, Philips continually threatened to kill the system, but because of the good sales, kept giving him one more game. With the help of his wife Linda, Ed would be responsible for creating 28 games for the Odyssey 2 G7000 in that time. That's over half of all the games for the entire system, written by one guy. If there's any other system ever that can say that, I don't think there is. Atari at the time had teams of programmers with notorious stories of parties and wild times. Meanwhile, Ed was on his own, just knocking out games for the G7000. It's just bonkers.
Mine! No, George. Mine.
The new video computer system by Atari. More games, more fun.
So, after coming across the system in my Argos video and falling in love with the look of it and then reading about its bonkers history, I decided I wanted one. But I also want a Vectrix and look how much they go for, so I was concerned it might be out of my price range. Well, no, not really. If you're happy to go for the classic eBay untested category, which can either mean it's actually untested or more likely broken, but hey, we'll get more money if we say untested, then you can get yourself a bargain. Now, there are a couple of variations to consider when buying one. Some, I think, earlier models had joystick ports and an external PSU, which is a favourable option over the one I went for that had the integrated joysticks and an internal PSU. Just bear in mind the differences when inspecting the listing that you're interested in. Now, my seller was pretty upfront with the state of the system, with plenty of photos showing broken joysticks, flappy cables, scuffs and scrapes. But for 30 quid plus postage, I was tempted enough to go for it. Now, I was kind of intrigued as to what condition these joysticks were in, because they did say they were in pretty bad shape. Flipping heck. Oh, look at the state of this. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll get that going. It does look like somebody did attempt to at least tape it together at some point, but that's in pretty bad shape. Let's have a look at the other one. See, this one's not as bad and might be salvageable. It's got the fire button missing, but other than that, it looks pretty clean. But yeah, it's at this point that I realised I had the one with the integrated joysticks, as it was still connected to the system. But yeah, it feels alright. And then we've just got the RF cable, power cable. Right, well, let's get the bad boy out. So much bubble wrap. Let's just jump cut to this. Trying to do it one hand is not the easiest. And there she is. So yeah, I mean, not the best shape. I do like the Made in France sticker on the front. Bit beaten up in there, but not too bad. But yeah, if you look at this, it's all scratched up. The keyboard is actually in pretty good nick. It looks fairly clean. Look at this corner here. Looks like it's been shaved. Oh, what the hell's happened here? I'd love to know what happened there. Somebody took out their frustrations on it. And then we'll turn this bad boy over. No rattles, which is always a good sign. Original stickers on the bottom, which is always a good sign also. What a great looking unit. So you can see my cables are sadly integrated. So let's see what joys that brings. But let's plug this thing in just as it is and see what state it's in. So on plugging again, it's doing this, which would suggest it's resetting itself, because when I press any of the start buttons, the game is starting and then going back to the select game screen. So I'm pretty sure it's a power supply fault. So that's going to be the first thing we look at. So let's open it up and take a look. So there you see the mouldings there for the joystick ports on systems that included them rather than the integrated ones. Kind of wish I had one of them, but there you go. Is what it is. But I've got regular screws on mine, although the first screw doesn't look right. And then I wonder what this was, and I think this excuse the dodgy camera work, but I had kids pulling at my legs at the same time. yeah, I think this was where if you've got a separate PSU plugs in, I think that's where the port goes. I don't know what these numbers mean, whether it's for different regions or something. So this is the PSU. Little jump cut to opening the lid. And that's where it plugs into the main board. Which is just a 5 volt apparently. So we'll come back to that in a minute. That's the RF modulator, where that plugs in. Now I do unscrew the motherboard and give that a good clean, but I didn't bother putting that in the video. And you see there, that's the 2 joystick ports. So they actually do just plug into the main board. So we might be able to do something with that as well. But yeah, it's a bit mucky. Few interesting things going on with this, but my soldering and repair knowledge goes to the extent of composite modding my ZX Spectrum, which is just snipping one cable and moving and jumping a pin across. So it's really, that's the extent of it. So I am not going to start mucking around with PSUs, that's for sure. So I unscrewed it, but it needs desoldering from the main board. So I got that off. Again, I'm not going to show you my desoldering techniques. And I had some of these from a project where I was going to put a mini USB port on a Frogger game for another project. So I had some of them knocking about. So I thought, why can't I use them if it just takes a 5 volt into the main board? So using those existing cables and my fantastic soldering skills and my fantastic camera work, I've managed to solder onto this board, and I'll show you the pinouts if I can just flip in. There we go. So black to ground. It's my fantastic soldering. Look at that, it's amazing. So I've taken the PSU out completely. So let's plug it in and see what we get now. So there we go, we have a picture. Quite a lot of noise on it, but brightness setting on the TV got rid of a lot of that. But I might be getting interference from something else. Joystick didn't work, completely buggered, as I thought it might be. So we opened that up and realised what a shit show of a joystick this is. Just a simple connector onto like a ribbon cable end, onto like a contact board with a joystick in the middle that rotates on a big spring, and that is it. What a shower of shit this is. So I've got some Atari 2600 joysticks and my Competition Pro, so I'm going to look into getting some Atari joystick ports soldered in. So we're going to look at that next, because I'm not dealing with this. So this is about as close as you're going to get to my soldering, because there's no chance I'm showing you my shoddy work. But there's where the joystick ports plug into the main board, and there are my 2 D9 Atari ports, where I repurposed the ones that are which are there on some of the systems. There's my mini USB fixed to the case. Looks all good. That cable tie clip was already there for the power supply, so I just repurposed that and did it inside, so that I'm going to keep the power supply with this. But if I need to open it up and do anything with the main board, then I can just unclip it all and Bob's your uncle. So there's the RF modulator, which I'm going to replace with either the RGB mod or a composite mod. CRG did a rather excellent video on the RGB mod, which I'll link in the description, but also have a look again and see if I can maybe work that out. And here's me playing Killer Bees on my Kempston Competition Pro. works a charm. So you can see there's still a bit of noise on the screen, but with the brightness turned down, it's not as bad and is much more playable. But yeah, I will be doing that that video output mod at some point, but I'm more than happy with that to begin with. Right, let's have a look at these games in a bit more depth. I'm not going to video them on this CRT though. I'm going to show you on an emulator, so it's a bit clearer, because there are some cracking games on this system. So let's go and check them out. Space Monster, or Alien Invader in the US, is obviously a Space Invaders clone, but with a twist. You will see here that when I get hit, I turn into a little guy, but if I fire at one of my bases, I can turn it back into a spaceship but lose the base. Once I lose all three and get hit again, then it's sadly game over. The Space Monster will swoop down when all your bases are out, or you destroy the other invaders. The score on the top left is the amount of times the Space Monster has won, and the score on the top right is the amount of times that you have won. It's the first to 10, which is a real slog, but what I love about this game is its simple yet unique twist on a classic genre. It may not look all that, but it's super playable and a real challenge. Another game of similar qualities is Munchkin, or Casey Munchkin in the US. Released 1 year before Atari managed to get a home port out, and this rather upset Atari a bit too much, they sued Philips over the game. Although Atari lost the case initially, they finally won on appeal, and it turned out to be an important early copyright law case that shaped how games were created. Saying all that though, this is probably my favourite home port Pac-Man clone. It has moving pills, which add a real interesting dimension to the game. On top of that, there are a bunch of different mazes to play, including a mode that turns everything invisible when you move. Lastly, there's even a level editor, which is crazy when you compare this all to the 2600 version, which is leagues apart. Finally, here we have Killer Bees. Now, where to start on this one? Well, you play a swarm of bees that must sting and kill a bunch of aliens. When you start stinging them, they slow down and eventually die and turn into gravestones. Watch out though, as they have their own alien swarms that can kill you. Now, what I love about this is the fact you don't immediately die, you just lose some of your swarm. It's really fast paced and also has an added extra laser beam zapper that you can use after each kill to eliminate the green pests. Such a solid little game, and like the two before, it's so simple and massively playable. And bearing in mind, these are just 3 of the ones that I've really sunk any time into. I've just started playing Pickaxe Pete as well, which is tons of fun. And there are so many good 2-player games that I'm going to introduce my kids to when I get a decent output on this, because I reckon they will love it. And lastly, to wrap things up, I just wanted to really show how awesome this thing looks. Here it is compared to my C64C. So you can really see it is a real chunky mother, takes up most of my desk here. But it's got a real 70s, early 80s look about it, in a futuristic type way. But I wonder if it ever looked cool back then. But it's got such a lovely vibe about it now. And whenever anybody sees mine sitting on the table, they ask what the hell it is. I'm really falling in love with it. Well, that's it for this episode. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.